Well, Doug, thank you very much for inviting me to join in your conversation. As a former teacher of Tafari Makonnen School and as a former student of Tafari Makonnen School, I'm delighted to join in this conversation. I thought I would like to say a few words on the development of modern higher education in Ethiopia. As you know, more or less that has been the education map road that I traveled, and the major contribution of modern higher education was made by Emperor Haile Selassie. Emperor Haile Selassie, as you know from the history of Ethiopia, was a student at the first modern public education that was started with Emperor Menelik. But soon in 1925, he built the first modern school, Tafari Makonnen School, which I was privileged to attend, and from then on to the University College and the university. The emperor's contribution of higher education to Ethiopia is unbelievably complicated, but steadfast. He believed in education, and more so, he believed in modern education. He believed that if he prepares his citizens with higher education, he will be able to modernize Ethiopia. His major concept of nation building, his major belief in independence, in freedom, he says this he can only do if he can have modern, educated citizens, and he has therefore worked very hard to develop the country in that area. He created Haile Selassie University in 1960. He created the college idea in the 1950s, and he developed the education system in general after he came back from England after the Italian invasion. And all that he did in the first 30 years of his reign, and he ended up developing a major, modern, higher education that has been recognized as one of the better universities in Africa. I have participated in that process, first as a student, and later on as a teacher, and as an administrator, as its president. And the book that I'm now in the process of writing simply is to try to capture this experience of mine and put it on record before I pass on. It is an education which will be divided, it's a book which will be divided largely into three broad sections. The first part will capture our heritage, our legacy of the traditional educational system, which, as you probably know, had existed for hundreds of years, and what has been its contribution to modern education. That will be the first part. And the second part will deal with the development of modern higher education and its contribution, the challenges that it faced, both educational, financial, political, and otherwise. And then I'll try to conclude that section by lessons that we have learned in this process that we have gone, that we might take into account in our future educational development. I said earlier that the development of modern higher education is very closely intertwined with the reign of Emperor Haile Selassie. I said that the emperor believed so much in education that he almost believed that to develop Ethiopia and to have peace in Ethiopia and in the world, he has to have citizens that are educated. And he repeated that several times in major speeches that he gave. Now, when I had served as a teacher in the university, I thought perhaps I could give you one or two instances how I was made to be the president of this university. One day, I was in the university and I got a telephone call from the palace. And when I said hello, I was told that I should come over to the palace. The emperor would like to see me. So I rushed. I went to the palace, and the emperor was then with his prime minister, Aklilu Habte-Wold, and two other people. And he talked to me about the university, what was going on, and how I was feeling about its development. In a sense, he kept on asking me questions about the administration of the university, about what I feel should be changed, if so. And I was, in a way, I was examined. I was in front of him and being asked a number of questions about how a university should be developed. And no, I didn't receive any warning. I didn't know what was happening, but I was simply answering questions that came from him and from the palace, from the prime minister. And at the end of that interview, the emperor said, I want you to put on record in 3-4 pages what you told me and bring it to me in 3-4 days. So I went back and I was a little bit baffled and I didn't know what was going on. And I put down on record what I talked to him, and instead of giving it to him on Friday, which he had told me to give him, I simply kept quiet, thinking that he may not remember if 2-3 days pass. Yeah, after all, he's a busy man. But lo, on Saturday morning, I got a telephone call from him, and he said, didn't you and I have a kind of a rendezvous? You're supposed to bring me a little written up material. And I was frightened. And I said, yes, Your Majesty, I have prepared the material and it's ready. He said, Your Majesty, he said, bring it over Monday. So Monday, I tried to brush it before Monday on Saturdays and Sundays. And all this, I'm doing it by handwritten. I went to the palace with a copy, and he asked me to read it. At this time, it was not only the Prime Minister, but there were 3-4 members of the board of Haile Selassie University. I read the material I prepared, and he told me to give him a copy, which I did, and went back. When 8 or 15 days after, I was again called to the palace, and then he said I was appointed as the president of the university. That is how I came to be the president of the university. Later on, I knew there was some kind of conversation between him and the board members, but I was not at all aware what was going on until I was told that I was made the president of the university. So that's one incident of my interaction with him, but the emperor is very good at interacting with students. He loves to interact with students. He loves to ask questions. He loves to ask them why do they want to go to school, what contribution would they make, what would they like to study, and why. And there is one incident that I still remember that I thought would capture his insight into how he thinks about motivating students. At the end of my school, Tafari-Makonnen School in grade 12, at the end of the school year in June, there used to be a prize given by him to all students who came out first, second, and third in their classes from the schools of Addis Ababa. And we all went to the palace, and when my turn came, I went to the emperor, and I was then first from grade 12 at the senior high school, and I saw in his hand a beautifully wrapped kind of a book, And I didn't know what it was. So he asked me a question, do you read the Bible? All of a sudden. And I said, Your Majesty, now and then I read the Bible. I couldn't lie. I do not read it every day. I said, yes, now and then I read the Bible. And he took that book, which looks like a Bible, and when I was about to receive it, he flipped it, and it turned out to be a watch, a table watch with his name written on it. And then he said this to me. He said, look, I'm giving you a watch. This watch, once it is filled, it tells the hour by itself. It does not need somebody else to tell it. And we are educating you and your friends and other students so that once educated, you will serve your country, you will serve your people without anybody prompting you. And that kind of an advice I still remember him from that experience of Tafari Makonnen School. I mentioned these two experiences simply to say the emperor used to come to the university around 5 o'clock, and this was a kind of, for him, I think he was just taking time, and there was also an opportunity for him to visit the Institute of Ethiopian Studies. And this was an opportunity for me as a president to catch him privately without anybody around. And we used to talk about the kind of problems that I have, the kind of difficulties that I'm facing, and the kind of help that I need from him. And, you know, we used to interact almost like friends without any fear. And the emperor makes you feel that if I have a problem, I should come over to the palace anytime and tell him. And he wants this university to be a great university. He wants this university to produce young people, young Ethiopians in all fields, but especially in medicine, in engineering, and in agriculture and other fields that will help the development of the country. The emperor was very eager that education develops and catches fire in Ethiopia, and he spoke that how one day not only will we talk about one university, but we will have several universities in the provinces. But he said, before we produce many universities, we must have a university with quality, and that the graduates of this university must be students of quality. Once that is achieved, he said, then we can spread quality, the quantity in the countryside. There are many aspects of the emperor's life and his interaction with his citizens, with his administrators, and especially I thought I need just to add maybe one or two instances which would show the personal side of the emperor's life. As you know, the emperor, of course, was a busy man, and he had a difficult time developing a country like Ethiopia, governing a country like Ethiopia with a tradition which goes into centuries, and a country which has been multi-ethnic and multilingual and multi-religious. It's not been easy. To modernize it without antagonizing the provincial lords and the provincial governors has not been easy. For him to encourage the development of religion to people in a country which has had a where one religion was predominant, that's the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, was not easy, because at the beginning education was more or less the prerogative of the church. And now with modern education coming, that privilege was fading away. And there was some uneasiness on their part, and he had to do it very carefully. So that's one aspect. And the way he did it was that we needed modern education, and he said education, Ethiopia rather needs modern education, like doctors. You, the priests, and other people also need to have doctors. The development needs educated farmers. At the same time, educated farmers and educated engineers need to be spiritual. They need the religious aspect of education. And that does not mean to be modern educated is to be antagonistic to religion. The two could be harmonious and could develop, and that is the kind of education he would like to develop in Ethiopia. And so he built slowly by getting these people to understand that to be educated in modern sense does not mean to be anti-religious. And to be religious does not mean that you cannot have modern education. And this is the way that I think personally made a tremendous contribution to the development of education in Ethiopia. That's one. The other thing that I remember about the emperor is his feeling about making a contribution to other African countries. When the African countries became independent, as you know, there were many countries that were independent and didn't have universities. And in one of the African meetings which took place in Ghana, the emperor decided that he would give 200 scholarships to African students coming from these newly independent countries. And when people asked him, I mean, you've just started modern education and you don't have enough school places even for your children. Why are you giving this to other African countries at this time? He said, we have to share. We have to share what we have with these people. They are our brothers. And, you know, I have been privileged to work with these people, with the African students who have come and who have gone to school, and when I was working at the university college, and later on, and I thought this was a contribution which opened up Ethiopia to the rest of Africa, and in a sense, we're now celebrating the 50th anniversary of the establishment of the African Union, and who else should be honored, in my opinion at least, than the Emperor Haile Selassie, because he is the one who brought the different groups into Addis, and he went to these other countries, and he created unity and understanding amongst these people. And I think this is a touching moment that I thought I should say something. It is an opportune moment for me to bring to my listeners the contribution that Emperor Haile Selassie has made. The other thing that you might be interested, or people might be interested about the emperor, is that the emperor does not distinguish between tribes and religious people. I mean, all are his citizens, and he encourages people, poor and rich, sons of the bureaucrats, of the aristocrats, and students or children from the poor people. As long as you are competent, as long as you are good students, he would encourage you and to go to foreign countries for further studies. And I think that's an important quality which he has and which he has brought into Ethiopia. When I want to mention this because in the modern concept of African modernization in broad terms, as you know, this question of tribe or of religion is often mentioned. And as far as the emperor goes, he said, we have a country, one country for all of us, and you could have several religions. That's your private property. It's up to you. But as far as the independence of your country, the freedom of your country, the development of the country, this is our common religion. This is the common religion of citizens, and that all citizens should respect. I mentioned earlier how I was called to the palace to answer some questions about the university, and how 2 weeks later I was called and made a president. That happened in January 1969. It was in January 1969 that I was made the president of Haile Selassie University. And this was a trying moment. Everybody remembers that 1968 was the year where broad student movements globally in Europe and in America and elsewhere was paramount, and the same thing had begun in Ethiopia. And so one of the characteristics and one of the challenges of my tenure as the president of the university was how to deal with students who really wanted to make the university a political center. They wanted to use the university to overthrow the government. And of course, that is not the essence of why a university was created. It was to develop qualified people and to do research work. And this challenge has been a challenge that I had to endure throughout my presidency. But other than this, there is a very significant and, in my opinion, a very healthy reminiscences of my presidency, and that is the period that we received help from around the world. When the university was started by the emperor, respected by all people because help came from all over. Help came from the United States, and a big help came from the United States. As you know, when the university was started, a letter had come from President Kennedy to the emperor praising him for having opened a national university, praising him for having given his palace, which he inherited from his father, to be the university, because he said nothing evidences the seriousness of a leader than opening a national university to benefit the development of education and the development and the maintenance of freedom, not only nationally but internationally. So this was a moment where help came from Europe, from the United States, from the United Nations, and I'm so privileged to say that it is a moment where I saw how international aid, international development, international cooperation could be used to the benefit of Ethiopia. And that is how the university in very short time grew in terms of a number of students, in terms of graduates of students, and in terms of the number of faculties, and moreover, in terms of the number of Ethiopian faculties that were trained in several United States universities, Canadian universities, and European universities, through scholarships given through USAID and other governments. The other aspect of this is the special assistance that we received from the Ford Foundation. I mentioned the Ford Foundation not because it was the only one, but because the way the assistance was given was so wonderful. I mean, they looked at our problem and they provided us with assistance, money if we needed money, professors if we needed professors, and it was so flexible, and they relied so much on our judgment. They didn't try to ask us, for nitpicking, and as a result, the assistance that they gave produced wonderful faculties. One example is the Faculty of Law. The Faculty of Law, whose dean was Professor James Paul, who came and he did a wonderful job in terms of building that faculty as one of the prominent faculties in not only in Ethiopia but also in Africa. The other aspect that I want to mention, I mean, this is a vast field. I cannot mention everything to you, but I thought the major highlights were how in something like 10 years we were able to nationalize the staff from foreign to Ethiopian, how to develop the number of faculties from 3, 4, 5 to 11, how and we have developed institutes of research which we were just getting ready with the young Ethiopian staff that have returned from abroad and in different places to do research work. It is at that time that the political development in Ethiopia really, got rougher and tougher, and of course, we just could not accomplish everything that we wanted, and it's at that time that I had to leave, and the rest of us had to leave, and the revolution took place in Ethiopia.